Tonight on The Factor Uncensored, after a deadline and threats of strikes, a sudden shift, President Trump now hitting pause on Iran. Later tonight, why is that one person's actions can define an entire community, race? Are Black Americans being unfairly stereotyped? Our panel is ready to sound off later on The Factor Uncensored, so don't go anywhere for that.
The Isiah Factor Uncensored starts now.
And welcome to The Factor Uncensored. A major update tonight in the growing U.S.-Iran standoff after previously giving Iran a deadline and warning of possible military strikes. Late this afternoon, President Trump took to Truth Social, announcing he's now holding off, writing, quote, "We will take the next 2 weeks to see if there is a diplomatic solution," agreeing to a 2-week pause on any attack, opening the door for negotiations. Now, this comes after rising tensions and fears of a much larger conflict. Now, the big question tonight is a real de-escalation or a temporary hold. Joining us to talk about it is University of Houston downtown professor Dr. David Branham and Iranian-American Brian Taif. Glad to have you both here on The Factor. Is the White House breathing a sigh of relief now that we don't have to go forward with this?
I think so. I think a whole lot of people are breathing a sigh of relief. This was going to be a disastrous intervention if we did it. And I mean, last night I was saying, this is going to surprise me if we actually do what he's saying. And thankfully, they found a way to back off, and now they can step back and have another strategy. The reality is that it was a really bad strategy. I mean, this is not just a one-time thing where we're going to obliterate your country if you don't open the strait. If you do obliterate the country, where do you go after that? There's nothing to do. They're going to still have control of the strait, but you will be the world's most unpopular person. Mm-hmm. So a much better strategy would be, look, we need to do this in steps. Let's put some pressure on. Let's get things the way we want them. And that way, you know, I think President Trump had a good chance to step back. He looked at a 10-point plan that was absolutely impossible to consider, but he gave it some credibility so that he could step back and have a better plan going forward.
And Brian, I think I read this morning there was still some bombing overnight and early this morning. For those who are saying, well, it never happened, did it actually happen? I think a bridge was taken out.
Absolutely. It's happening on both sides, actually. The Iranian side is actually firing missiles at Israel right now, and the Israel side is still firing missiles at Iran.
But that wasn't action taken by the U.S.?
No, that was Israel.
Got it.
As far as my understanding is that was Israel that conducted those military operations. But it's still ongoing. The reason that the Islamic Republic is using for the missiles that are reaching out of Iran right now is that they don't have communication within their own channel, within their own regime, to tell them to stop shooting those rockets as a schedule.
Wow.
That goes to show the multi-layered system within the Islamic Republic that's designed for them to survive.
And how are the people reacting on the ground? You have family members, friends there. What are they saying now? Are you able to communicate with anyone?
Absolutely. Not family members, they're older in age, but with people inside of Iran, yes. There's a lot of people who have a Starlink, who have other means of communication through reaching out to their family. And I'll be honest with you, there's a little bit of disappointment from the Iranian community right now because they think this is it. The U.S. is walking away from the situation. Israel is walking away from the situation. And they're out there to face the Islamic Republic by themselves alone again. So there's a little bit of hesitation about how the Iranian community feels about this, but I feel pretty confident that the people in charge know exactly what they're doing.
So did they want to see bombing? Did they want to see action taken by the United States?
Absolutely. Before the bombing started, I'm Iranian-born American. I advocated for this military conflict since day one back in December when the Iranian people were uprising. A lot of people inside of Iran, they're putting posters of President Trump all over the streets. They're naming streets after President Trump. They wanted this military conflict because the same regime that we are fighting right now is the same regime that was shooting them with 50 caliber machine gun in the streets 2.5 months ago. So when you're facing an evil regime that's that ruthless to you and your citizens. What other options you have beside a foreign government, foreign entity coming inside your country and equalizing this playing field? So this is something that they embrace and they still do.
And really quick, in the last 30 seconds we have here, who was more responsible for this? Was Pakistan? Did they play a key role, or was it just U.S. to Iran officials, or did Pakistan serve as the go-between?
I think Pakistan was the go-between. I think the U.S. is most responsible for this, because I think they really wanted to step back from what the president was actually saying. So they used Pakistan as a go-between. They got the 10-point plan, and then they said, we're going to react to this and work from here.
All right, gentlemen, thank you for joining us. Coming up, we continue this discussion, but with some more perspective. We're adding 2 Iranian Americans to the panel, and tensions escalate between the U.S. and Iran. What do they think? And later, a powerful conversation on black stereotypes. Are black Americans being unfairly judged? Stay with us here on The Factor Uncensored. Welcome back to The Factor Uncensored. Tonight, we're following breaking developments in the Trump-Iran conflict. After threatening major strikes on Iranian infrastructure, the president is now agreeing to a 2-week ceasefire just hours before his deadline. So what happens next, and how do some Iranian Americans feel? Joining us to the panel is Iranian Americans Kiani Komezi and Isiah Kian. Glad to have you both here on The Factor Uncensored. So what we heard from Brian was maybe some Iranians there on the ground wanted this bombing to go through. Your thoughts about that?
So I just want to make sure we all understand we are trying to amplify the Iranians' voices that the regime cut, since they don't have internet or phone. And a couple hours ago, one of my friends just talked to her sister. She was crying. She felt that the U.S. is abandoning them and leaving them alone with this regime again. So I'm sure President Trump can make a better decision and has a really good goal for us, but we just want to get rid of this regime. Our country got hostage for the last 47 years, and we want our country back.
And for those who may not understand what those citizens are going through, what is it like under that regime?
It's pretty terrible. I was born and raised in Iran, in a city called Mashhad, and then I moved to Tehran, the capital. This is the type of regime that would detain and beat up Iranian women for showing their hair, for not having proper hijab. And proper hijab has been defined by them, by the regime. This is the type of regime that if you speak out against them on social media, you have to be jailed, you have to go to prison. This is the type of regime that massacred Iranians over and over and over in the past 47 years. Before I was born, I was born in 1996. Before I was born, there were uprisings in different schools and universities all over Iran. They killed students, they jailed them. Some of the students are still missing to this day. day. Their parents are looking for them. Just 2.5 months ago, they massacred more than 50,000 people in Iran. The reason that we don't have the real number, the exact number, is because we don't have independent journalism in Iran. We can't even send journalists over there if they don't abide by the rules of the regime. And these are my people. I lost 5 friends, people that I grew up with in Iran, by the hands of the regime 2.5 months ago. These are people who are desperate. These are people who don't want anything crazy. They just want basic freedoms. They just want something that, for us who are sitting over here, she's showing her hair. No one is going to tell her, be like, why are you showing your hair? Because this man, this Muslim man, going to get provoked sexually because you show your hair, right? We don't think like that. These things don't even, it's just out of our perspective over here in America. This is, I think, one of the most important reasons why a lot of people are having a really hard time to understand what type of regime is the Islamic regime in Iran. These are hardliner clerics.
And before we go, we have about 30 seconds. How difficult is it knowing family members and friends remain there when you are enjoying the freedom of America?
I think that says it all, Isiah. Something that we all are feeling. You want to help the situation, but there's so much you can do. Like Kiani said, being their voice, having the opportunity to speak on their behalf is the best thing that any of us can do. And we're so blessed to call the United States home, to have the opportunity to sit across a free journalist, to have this conversation. The people in Iran don't have that option right now. They're facing bullets when they're chanting slogans from the balcony. So the reality of our lives and their lives is completely different.
Well, we want to thank you guys for joining us. And of course, we'll continue to bring you back and follow this as we continue our coverage. Thank you for your time. Still ahead, disturbing allegations from behind the scenes of one of TV's most iconic game shows, The Price is Right. Claudia Jordan tells her story. You don't want to miss this in a Factor exclusive.
This program is being brought to you by Jim Adler, the Texas Hammer.
And welcome back to The Factor Uncensored. Tonight, a shocking look behind the scenes of one of daytime TV's most iconic game shows. New allegations of racism, harassment, and a hostile work environment now resurfacing in a new docuseries, Dirty Rotten Scandals, The Price is Right. And one of the women at the center of it all, Claudia Jordan, is speaking out. She says this isn't new. She fought it back then, and now she's telling her story again. plan. And before we begin, Bob Barker's rep and a former producer of The Price is Right says this is just a hit piece on Bob's legacy and the show. CBS has not issued a formal statement as of yet. Let's take a look. And joining us now here on The Factor Uncensored, we have the great Claudia Jordan, actress, host, beauty queen, and it just goes on and on. Your resume is incredible, Claudia. And of course, many people know you from the beginning of your career on The Price is Right from 2001 to 2003 when you were the second black female on that show. But some things have come out about Bob Barker and The Price is Right on the E! Entertainment channel, The Dark Side of Entertainment. And it was just shocking to many of us to hear these stories about the racism that went on behind the scenes and the bad treatment you all had at The Price is Right. So, first of all, many people have criticized you for saying, why now? But you say what to that, Claudia?
No, it's why now that they are now paying attention to this, because I filed a lawsuit. I filed a claim. I filed complaints immediately when it happened. So it's not like I didn't try at the time. What happens with these big companies is they don't want to go to trial, so they'll pay you off. They'll settle the case, or they'll make it very difficult to go to trial. A lot of times these contracts now, what they do is they make you sign up front and agree to not take them to court, where if there is an issue that you would have to go to mediation first. A lot of companies do that. So it never has any jeopardy of, they're never really in danger of really going to court. So that's what they do to try to keep things quiet. But I've been vocal about this. Immediately when it happens, I came forward. It's just that.
And for those really quick, Claudia, who don't recall that lawsuit, what did you sue for, and did you get a settlement?
Yeah, I got a 6-figure settlement. It was for racial discrimination, hostile work environment, and really the retaliation and sexual harassment. There was a producer there by the name of Phil Wayne Rossi, who was a nepotism hire. His father got him into that job. He was very unqualified. He's now deceased, and good riddance to him. I'm sorry, that sounds mean, but he terrorized a lot of women over the 22 years that he worked at that show, and nobody was ever able to take him to task, and nobody was ever able to get him fired until I came along and corroborated wholesome stories. So it was difficult. Like he put his hands on my behind. He was like, nice ass. And then he, when I complained about it immediately to a producer and filed a complaint, he started his retaliation case against me, as many corporations do. They start to get together a paper trail. Oh, you're late today, and if you're late again, you'll get suspended. I'm like, what do you mean I was late? What he was doing, what I found out was when I pulled up on the lot, he had a security guard at the front call him directly, and he would know that Claudia Jordan has arrived. And Phil would run to the meeting room and set the clock forward 5, 6, 7, 8 minutes. Now, models showed up in that room before or after me, but none of them were ever written up. Only I was written up, because that stunt was only for me. So I was being targeted, and it made me feel like I was kind of losing my mind a little bit. Like, wait, what do you mean I'm late? I made an effort, and it was retaliation. I knew once I spoke out about it, my time there was limited. My days were numbered.
And when you hear about, or you were there, the allegations about the man himself, Bob Barker, being, as many would call it, racist against Black people, your thoughts about that, and what did you see or feel as an employee of the legendary Price is Right? Here you walk into this game show that we've all been watching for decades, and you walk into hell.
So one thing I do want to be clear about. I don't think Bob Barker was a sexual harasser. I do believe he had a consensual relationship with Diane. But once he found out, the tipping point for him to be mad and to get rid of Diane, she did Playboy twice. He wasn't happy about it. But really, when he found out that she had sex with more than one Black man in her past, that's what made him be like, what? That's disgusting. And the attitude, well, what he said was he believed that Black people, Black men specifically, had the most communicable diseases. Okay. And then it was the environment. I noticed with the contestants, the way they chose the contestants, it was not random. They would pick on personality, but the stereotypes were reinforced with the contestants. I was reached out to people that were in the audience since this documentary has come out, even people sitting in the audience where they were seated. A Black woman reached out to me and said, I was there. You're not lying. We were the first people in line, and we were placed at the back of the studio at the very back, the worst seats in the house, to just get them out of the camera's view. And I'm like, Jesus Christ, even the audience members face this? You know, and it's just like, it just sucks that a show that I think Black people were very largely supportive of, all of our grandmas.
Oh, absolutely.
Right? They watch Price is Right and their stories, The Young and the Restless. And Young and the Restless was right across from our studio. And, you know, I was very happy to get that job, but it's bittersweet knowing that he played in our faces, and the way he would shrink away from Black contestants that just wanted to hug him and flirt with young-looking white women. He was a jerk. I mean,
and do you regret coming forward? Yeah, I mean, you did it back then with your lawsuit. People just didn't pay attention. Do you regret it in any form now? Have people attacked you as a result of coming forward again now?
Hell no, I don't regret it. And I'll do it a million times over. I've always been the type of person to fight for what's right. Like most Black women in America, we're always fighting for the women that come before us, whether they are our skin color or not. It's always us at the front of the line, like, I'll take this hit. And there was a time where people said you'd never work again. Well, I proved them wrong. Because immediately afterwards, I was hired on Deal or No Deal, which was a #1 show on NBC since Friends, just ridiculous ratings, and that led to a million other things. I do want to say one thing that wasn't covered in the documentary, so you're going to get an exclusive right here.
And right there, you heard it, an exclusive coming from Claudia Jordan, a former Barker girl on The Price is Right. We're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, you hear that exclusive in her own words. Stay with us.
If you're injured here in Houston,
The guy who said, come on down, Claudia Jordan pulling back the curtain on what she says was a toxic and troubling environment. One part of The Price is Right now revealing what was wrong behind the scenes. She shares details that didn't make it into the docuseries. And before we begin, Bob Barker's rep and a former producer of The Price is Right say this is just a hit piece on Bob's legacy and the show The Price is Right. CBS not issued a statement as of yet.
One of the things that was really disgusting to me, that really actually gave me comfort that I was doing the right thing, was I was really good friends with Rod Roddy, the announcer on The Price is Right. Now,
I remember him.
Yes. Now, he's passed away as well. I knew he was gay. Okay, we knew. Bob Barker was very homophobic as well. And very, in my opinion, and very cruel to this man. Rod was fighting for his life the last year or two on the show, and he had cancer, but he still looked good. And Bob knew more than anything that shot of him on the show when he says, come on down, you're the next contestant on The Price is Right. Rod Roddy lived for that moment. And as soon as we found out that Rod had cancer, Bob Barker, per his orders, removed Rod's one camera shot during the show, and it broke Rod Roddy's heart. I spent the last 30 days of his life in going to visit him in the hospital, and he told myself and a few other people many, many stories about the horrible treatment and the things that were going on behind the scenes of The Price is Right, calling people the F word that he thought were in the community. He would put his mic down and say stuff. We were called one time by someone else behind the scenes. It wasn't Bob. That I heard the headset. All that kind of stuff. And I wish there was enough time to cover that, but the treatment of Rod Roddy, it really pissed me off. And it made me not regret ever coming forward and telling on the environment it was hostile. A man with cancer fighting for his life, being told on his deathbed by Bob, hey, when you die, I want to handle the PR and how it's framed. What? Because he didn't want anything. Bob didn't want any of the bad stories about him, how he treated Rod Roddy, to come out. So it was sexism, racism, homophobia. It was all the things. I mean, Bob was born in the 1920s, and he lives up to that exactly.
All right. Claudia Jordan, thank you for joining us here on The Factor Uncensored. And like I said, you have many jobs and we can find you everywhere. Where can we specifically look for you next and to hear what you're talking about?
We're reimagining Side Dish, so you'll be catching that on social media and on YouTube and still on Fox Soul. Also, I have a podcast that just got nominated for an Image Award, Accidentally Informed. I have a movie that went in the top 10 on Variety. You can catch on Tubi, called Rockabye. And this Wednesday, tomorrow, I come back for the second half of Love and Hip Hop Miami. Please check that out. And thank you, Isiah. I love what you're doing. And that panel you had a couple weeks ago with them sisters and them white women, let me tell you something. You do part 2, please call me. I will drive myself down to Houston, okay?
All right, we will definitely call you. And thank you, the busiest woman in entertainment, Claudia Jordan. Thank you for joining us here on The Factor Uncensored.
You're watching the Isiah Factor Uncensored.
And welcome back to the second half hour, The Factor Uncensored. Tonight, a real question. Are black people judged by stereotypes more than other races? The numbers say many believe so. A Pew study found 63% of black Americans say media coverage is more negative, and nearly 4 in 5 say they see stereotypical depictions. Tonight, we ask on our viewers on Instagram at The Isiah Factor, do black people get stereotyped more? 82% said yes, 18% said no. So why does one person's actions sometimes define an entire community, the race? Is this bias, perception, or something deeper? Joining us to talk about it, we have Derek Muhammad, Todd Smith, Jasmine Terry, Reginald OG1 Gordon, and Banke here on The Factor Uncensored. Now, Todd, this was your idea. I saw it on your Instagram.
Yes.
I said, let's do this topic on the show. What have you seen out there that gives you this message?
What I see out there are excuses to why African Americans are treated badly. Like, all of us probably as black men have gone to the malls, especially when we were younger. You had a white person clutch their purse, follow you around the store, and the reason that they would give is, well, most thieves are black. Mm-hmm. Most shoplifters are black. So that becomes a stereotype of an entire race of people, but we never see the flip side of that. Statistics show us that most school shootings are done by white males, but we don't see people running out of schools every time a white boy goes into the schoolhouse. Most child pornography producers, 70 to 75% are white men. Most sexual offenders, 50-something% are white men, but we don't see black mothers clutching their children when a white person walks into the mall. And it comes from hatred. Everybody has prejudice, but I think hatred is so ingrained in some people's mind. And me and Derek talked about this before the panel. Hatred and these stereotypes were placed on us to justify our mistreatment, to justify our enslavement, to justify brutality against us. Because how can you treat a human being like an animal?
And it was at one point called subhuman.
Thank you. You have to put it in your mind that these people are subhuman, these stereotypes are true, and that hatred has gone down from generation to generation. So when a white person does something negative, it's not seen as indicative to the whole race. But when one black person does something negative, you could have 10 black people with doctorates. Let one black person drop out of high school. See, all of them are uneducated. Well, what about the 10 that have doctorates? So it comes from a deep-seated hatred, and until I don't think we can do it. We just have to pray. Unless we change people's heart, these stereotypes will continually negatively affect us more than other people.
And what is the trickle-down effect that we see as a people, Banke?
I think we saw this on the panel a couple of weeks ago. We see accusations.
And that was a panel about
the
black women being vilified.
Absolutely. And then we were on the panel and we were vilified while being on the panel.
Absolutely.
But I think what to me is the more damaging, and I think all the points that Todd made are true, is when it becomes internalized, right? When we start to, so let's say you have a bad experience with a black business, then it's, oh, you know how black business is. But if you go into a white restaurant and they're not on point, you don't make this sweeping indictment about white businesses. And then on the other hand, you have...
But would that be intraracial issues, black and black?
Yes, but that's why I said to me what's more damaging, because like you said, we can't control other people's hearts, right? My focus is always on my own people. So when I see us start to internalize these stereotypes, that's the piece to me that really piques my interest. And then even the idea of positive stereotypes, like I've seen on social media white women bragging about this, like, oh, I teach my children if they get lost in the grocery store, go find a black woman. And it's like, I'm not here to do your labor. So what you're saying is that we're trustworthy, we're nurturing, we'll put the country on the back.
The mammy syndrome.
The mammy syndrome. And all these things are, I mean, true and positive, but let us decide, right?
You don't know how to deal with that positive, huh? You're like,
it's
positive in a 50s, 60s
right.
sort of year.
Yeah. It's more labor. We're the muse of the earth.
Absolutely.
And Reginald, is there denial, though, in our community?
Absolutely, absolutely. And I say that to say because, you know, even going back to the 1990s when one of the most powerful women that sits in the White House called Hillary Clinton put the negative stereotype out on super predators being black boys, on how that affected hundreds of thousands of black boys ending up going to prison, being called, dehumanized them as animals, tough on crime, tough on juvenile, being kicked out of school. So when she put that negative stereotype on calling young boys super predators, that played a huge role. And still today, young boys playing that, looking at themselves in that negative way.
Go ahead, Derek. Real quick, Derek, your thoughts about this. Are we, however, letting some individuals slip through the cracks and not calling them out for their behavior in the black community?
Of course, I would say that we are letting some individuals slip through the cracks, but...
And then again, I would ask, is that our responsibility as a people? Well, because when you think about the white community, the Hispanic community, everyone didn't have to be responsible for everyone.
Yeah, well, we have to... I was always taught that if you want to solve a problem, you have to go to the root of the problem. And even though we do have a problem with black inferiority complexes, and as my sister stated, we go into a black-owned business and we have one bad experience and all of a sudden there's a sweeping indictment. See, this is why I don't support black-owned businesses. But if you have a bad experience in an Asian-owned businesses, you may not go back to that particular location, but it's not an indictment on all Asian-owned businesses. But where does this come from? It comes from centuries of conditioning. People have been conditioned to think the worst of black people. And when you have been conditioned to think the worst of a community, then you're gonna always look for the worst. You see a 6'2" black boy. First question you ask him is, do you play basketball? You see a 6'2" white boy. Oh, he might be, the president one day. There are all of these negative stereotypes about black fathers, even though the CDC came out with a study that says that black fathers are more involved and engaged in their children's lives on a day-to-day basis than anybody else. Same with black women. Look at Michelle Obama. Michelle Obama defied all of those stereotypes. She was the most graceful first lady that this country has ever seen. And because they couldn't find anything negative about her character, they started talking about the way the sister looked, even though she's beautiful. As if Barbara Bush and Nancy Reagan were beauty queens.
We got to take a break there. I ain't running from you. We just have to take a break there. Up next, before we let Jasmine help us land it, we ask the hard question, is it the system or are we part of the problem too? We'll expand on that. Stay with us here on The Factor. And welcome back to The Factor Uncensored. Now, the why. Is this about bias or accountability? Let's get back to the panel. Jasmine, your thoughts on what we have seen on social media, on television, around the country, around the world.
Around the world. So for me, it's always why, right? We ask the question why. I think it's purposefully done to interrupt us, because you interrupt us, we can't focus. You have us so distracted looking at what's going on with the police, right? We're distracted with what's on television. We're distracted with the music industry. There's so many ways that they're purposely trying to distract us as Black people that is sickening, right? That because the moment they know that we smell the resilience that we have, that they cannot control us. You know, the world gaslights Black people around the world. The Asian community, the Latin community, everyone. And you think about it, the question is always why. And as we ask why, we go deeper into history to understand, right? The main purpose is to keep us distracted, that we cannot focus. We can't focus on the family. We can't focus on the economic power that we need to focus on, right? You want to have us distracted with the media. You want to distract us with the music industry, you know? So, and this is what the children listen to. This is not knocking entertainment, right? But this is who they have purposely designed to control our people, right? It's not what the fathers in the homes, right? It's done through media. And when we think about it, who are we as people uninterrupted, right? When we're not worried about what George Floyd got killed in the middle of the street, right? We worried about what they're saying about us, and somebody shaking their ass over here on the other side. Can I say that? I'm sorry. But I'm just saying, who are we as people uninterrupted? I heard a lady on Instagram who made that statement, and I was like, wow. Who am I, Jasmine Terry, uninterrupted, when I'm not distracted with the noise, when I can focus on my spirituality, when I can focus on empowering my brother, empowering my sister? Who am I?
And so my question for the group, we've all heard of self-determination. Why do we have to be distracted? Why can't we as individuals focus? What's going on out there that's preventing us from doing that time?
I just think it's too much media. You know, it's too much, it's too many distractions. It's hard not to be distracted with your cell phone cameras. You're seeing Black folks getting in the fights. You're seeing brawls. You're seeing, like you said, the racism. You see, it's hard to be focused on what's important in life because there are too many voices. And we talked about parents, and Derek talked about how Black parents are more involved than anybody else. But it's kind of hard being a parent 24 hours a day when you have your child is away from you most of the time.
It's by design.
Yeah.
It's by design that Black people around the world are distracted. They are in our other cultures, are in our communities, making money. They're around here controlling what our children listen to. They're teaching your children. The last panel we sat here with a woman who said, I was a teacher at an inner city school.
And that's a problem.
This is a person that is teaching your children. So we have to get to teach, feeding our own. The Honorable Elijah Muhammad talked about how we have to teach our people. You can't allow people to control us. It's in our community, and we're purposely distracted. We are purposely distracted because the moment you are not distracted, you can focus. You're resilient. We created American culture. Look what African culture do around the world. The innovation, what Black Americans created in the United States, the world utilizes.
And if young Black people realize that, it would just change the world. If you realize that you're not just the gangster image that you see on a Star's TV show, you're not just the gangster image that the record companies are paying the radio stations to play, and the debauchery and the music. And you come from greatness.
Absolutely.
But that is why history is trying to be rewritten in the school. I can't teach you the greatness of your people.
You can't.
I can't teach you about the Black astronaut Victor Glover who just went to the moon. I'm gonna try to X that out. Pretty soon that'll be X'd out. The science books. I have to make you, like you said, distracted, so
you have to be so interrupted.
So Derek, you and Reginald both work with young people. How do you take the blinders off those young people and make them aware of some of the things that Jasmine and Todd are talking about, the accomplishments other than what they see immediately on social media?
Well, you have to take them out of the environment that has them distracted. You have to place them in an environment that suits their nature. You have to place them in an environment, and you have to teach them from a curriculum that they see themselves in.
Absolutely.
So yes, we are being interrupted, but we must never forget that we're also being targeted. And that propaganda has always been used to justify oppression, all the way from the transatlantic slave trade. They had to paint the picture that we were savages with bones in our noses, even though we were builders of civilization on the continent of Africa. But they had to create that globalized propaganda to justify what they did to our ancestors.
Absolutely.
They had to do the same for the Jim Crow era. They had to do the same in the era of lynching. They had to create propaganda. What do they call us, super predators? To justify mass incarceration.
Absolutely.
So the more we learn about ourselves, the less likely we are susceptible to fall for this propaganda, this anti-black propaganda that is just, it's American culture at this point.
And there's also
we're going to have to take a break. We'll come back and put you to work.
Oh, not work. I don't labor, honey.
You're going to use your knowledge tonight.
Okay, I like that.
All right, we'll be right back. Stay with us. We're going to talk solutions. And welcome back.
Responsible. We didn't create this narrative. I think it's been detailed in how history and how profitable this narrative is when we're talking about the media. If it bleeds, it leads, right? And since these stereotypes are so ingrained in our society, it's familiar for people to see this, even when it comes down to like the coverage of criminals, or even when somebody unfortunately passes, the pictures that are chosen are used to display the same image. But we as Black people, and again, I don't waste my time with what our counterparts are doing, right? We have more of an investment in our advancement. So we as Black people, even when we're teaching our history, it's such a balance to be had, and that it's not so steeped in the oppression. Like, oh, we were able to do all of this despite of. No, we were able to do all of this because of who we are. Because what I see happening now is that we are even using more of the negative stereotypes. Like, people speak more about things that they don't like than what we want more of. And whatever you give your attention, it grows. I don't want to see conservatives talking down on us, right? I want to see Black people in various ways showing accountability. And that accountability is often rooted in opportunity. You say pull yourself up by your bootstraps where the person doesn't have legs, right? And of course I'm speaking figuratively, so I just think it's nuanced, and we can't look to the people who are benefiting from our oppression to clean up our image.
All right.
We have to do that.
And Reginald, what are your thoughts about accountability as a people and individuals who may be those stereotypes in dealing with them as well?
Well, you know, there's always been a statement that I've always said: when Black men stand up, our boys will sit back down. And once we get back into our community, clean up our community, because boys gonna only be what they actually see. And as they see men standing up, doing the right thing, cleaning up our own neighborhood, rebuilding our family structure, I've always had a program I had in place called the Rites of Passage that I've been wanting to put together. We have to take over back our communities, go back in these public schools. I'm in the schools dealing with young people on that level because I want them to see me. Every time you see me, I'm suited and booted. I want to be the example that they can see. So if they see something new, they can change to be something different. Even though my past tells that I can change, they can change. So we have to put programs in place to where we take over the community, rebuild, reestablish the families, go in these schools, take over these jails, and everybody that come out to jail have to come in front of a panel of people to teach them the way of life. We have to reteach these brothers once they get out these jails and these juvenile facilities. And even dealing with our boys, when we already know in our school systems, we know that the public school is not good for our children because they're getting into 12th grade, graduating with a 5th grade education. So we have a lot of work to do on our part to re-clean up our community to make it a better place for our children once they step out the door to see good men standing up, being men.
And Derek, one of the things you mentioned, and it almost sounds like Carter G. Woodson's book, Miseducation of the Negro. How do you reverse that? And do you solely see from the perspective of Reginald there, where we also have a big responsibility in the community first, and then we work outwards?
Yeah, absolutely. I always believe that you're most effective when you focus on what it is that you can control. You may not be able to control what goes on in the White House, but you can control what goes on in your house. What we have to do is we have to make sure we have a well-developed and well-established vision for our community as a whole, regardless of your religion, regardless of your ideology, regardless of our differences. Let us set that aside and let us create a vision for our community. Now, as it relates to these stereotypes, what we have to do is we have to start telling our own stories. We have to create our own narratives. And those narratives have to feed the vision that we have set forth for our community. So we gotta settle our differences internally. We have to come together and establish a Black agenda that is by Black people and for Black people, and the stories that we tell, the narratives that we create has to lead us down the path of accomplishing what we've set forth in that agenda.
And it's no conspiracy against you, Derek. There's another commercial break.
Conspiracy! Stereotypes. All my life I had to fight.
And welcome back to The Factor Uncensored, and we are wrapping up with our guest. One of the things you said, Derek, really quick, is focusing on the black family, trying to get it together, dealing with your household. But many people take offense to that and feel like if we talk about that, that may be against them. But that's not against them. That's improving us.
Yes, well, self-improvement is the basis for community development. So everything starts with self. And again, we must start with that which we can control. We have to also accept reality. And the reality is, for 400 plus years, black people have been systematically placed at the bottom of the totem pole. Like, this country has been conditioned to think the worst of us. So if you live in a country where you've been targeted and everybody thinks the worst of you, you gotta double down on your own community self-esteem. So when I look at you, Isiah, knowing that the rest of this country thinks the worst of you, I'm busy trying to find the best in you. And when I'm looking for the best in my brother or my sister, then I'm gonna get busy doing what I gotta do to bring the best out of you, even if you're not, you know, behaving that way in the moment, because you be cut up sometimes, brother. But we have to change the way that we see one another. And once we go down that road, I don't think we can be stopped.
All right, Jasmine, we're going to let you land it.
I think it's extremely important that we get back to having, which I called a culture code. You know what I mean? This is what we do as a culture. This is not my culture, right? And I think everyone has their hands in a pot, and they're literally misguiding us on what path we should do and what we should do, and we should only teach our own. And we also need to dismantle those systems that they present to us. I do think we should have a black tax, which we tax ourselves to the betterment of our community. Right? And that's something that needs to be structured, but we need to take care of our own people. You know, and not waiting for anyone to give us anything, not waiting for the president or someone else to make a decision on how we should move. As black people, we should have a agenda, and we stick to it like every other culture do.
All right, out of time. Todd, thank you for this topic. As I said, we saw it on your social media, and we decided to bring it here to the Factor viewers, and we appreciate you all for joining us. And of course, we want to thank you for joining us, and follow these guys. If you're looking for more solutions, you can catch them on social media. Jasmine will even teach you how to land it. Thank you guys for joining us. Check us out on YouTube at Isiah Factor Uncensored, and of course, social media as well. Good night. All righty, guys.